So in this video, we're going to focus on melody. And melody is the element of music that identifies the song. All right, let me give you an example. If I play this, you have no idea what song that is. It could be a million different songs, right? But if I play this with it, okay, now you know what song that is, right? It's Mary Had a Little Lamb. How do you know that? Well, you know that because I played the melody. I played the part of the song that identifies it. Now, a melody, of course, goes for the length of a song, right? Or at least most of it. But it can be broken down into smaller sections, okay? The first smaller section of a melody that I'd like to talk about is called a phrase. And the definition for phrase is exactly that. It's a shorter section within a melody. Let me give you an example from the Beatles, Let It Be. Okay, now that's not the whole melody, but I did hit a resting point in the melody, okay? And that's how we define a phrase, right? That's how we break that up into smaller sections, is we listen for those resting points. Sometimes those resting points have a large space, or are a large space, and sometimes it's a very short space, but you'll always hear some sort of pause there. Right? And then the melody finishes, right? Okay. So the melody finished, yes, with a second phrase, all right? Now, that point where you have that resting place for a phrase is called a cadence. And a cadence, as you probably could tell just now, can either be what we call conclusive or inconclusive. A conclusive cadence is one where it feels like almost the melody could stop, where it feels like things have concluded. That's why it's called that. So, right, that's conclusive. That feels like it stopped. But the first part of that melody, if I just stop there, that doesn't sound like it's ready to end. Okay, so we call that inconclusive. So a phrase is a smaller section of a melody, right? But we can actually break things down even more into what we call a motive. A motive is just a fragment of a melody where you can still identify a bit of the melody, but it's just a small, tiny bit of it. And when we usually talk about a motive is when we talk about what's known as motivic development. Motivic development is when that motive is repeated, either the exact same way every single time or with some small differences. Let me give you an example, okay? There's a song by the saxophonist Sonny Rollins. He's a great jazz saxophonist. The melody goes like this. All right, that's just the first phrase of the melody. The motivic development in that phrase occurs here. This kind of doorbell-like sound. Hear how that's repeating? There's a slight difference. It kind of goes away from what it originally was and then back, and goes back and forth like that. Okay, that phrase actually happens twice. Now I'll play this next part a little bit slower. Okay, and there we have that same motive, but being played higher. It's not exactly the same notes, but it is that same motive. It is based off of this original one. Okay. And the fact that that's occurring is showing us that there is continued development of this motive beyond. All right. So all of that, anytime you're hearing that in that melody, it's all motivic development. All motivic development. Okay? So we need to know what the motive is in order to be able to identify motivic development. But it is, and motivic development is something that you hear quite frequently in jazz and popular music, or really just in any genre. Incidentally, when that motive was played higher, right, it was that same motive, but it was moved higher from where it was originally. We call that a sequence. Okay? Okay, so the last two terms that we're going to talk about in relation to melody are range and melodic contour, sometimes called shape. Okay, let's focus on range first. Range refers to either the entire melody or a portion of the melody, but what we're going to be really talking about is the distance between the lowest and the highest note. Now, those notes could have others in between them, okay? But that's what we're really talking about. When, you know, whether the range is narrow, which would be a small distance between the highest and lowest note, medium, or wide, right? That's what we're referring to. I'll give you an example of the Star Spangled Banner. Okay? So we start here. That's as low as I'm going to go in that phrase. That's as high as I go in that phrase. Okay? So really this is our range. Okay? Because that's the distance, that's our lowest note, and that's our highest note. And again, the terms that you use, narrow, medium, or wide. But it's important for you to keep in mind that those terms are fairly subjective. So if we have a melody like the Star Spangled Banner, you might get someone who says that they hear that as a medium range. And you might have someone else say, well, that sounds more like a wide range to me. Both answers are acceptable. What we want to make sure we do is agree on the more extreme examples of, let's say, a narrow or a wide range. So if that's the range of your melody, we want to all agree that that is a wide range. Nobody wants to try to say that that's narrow, right? It's not narrow. It's a very, very wide range. Okay? Same thing would be here. Those notes are very close together. We don't want to say that those are that is a wide range. We want to say that it's narrow. Okay? So fairly subjective, but we want to agree on the extremes. So with melodic contour, we're talking about the direction of the melody. Okay? And this like range can be applied to an entire melody, but usually we talk about contour or shape in reference to a smaller section of a melody. For instance, we're talking about the direction. If we take the Star Spangled Banner, okay, we're going to say it starts off descending because it's going down. That's the term we would use. And then it ascends, okay? It goes up. Every melody that you hear is wavelike, right? And Star Spangled Banner is a perfect example. It goes down and then up, okay? Wavelike melodies go down and up or up and down, right? They do both. So usually we're going to talk about whether something is ascending or descending in reference to a certain phrase or a certain portion of a melody. But also how the melody moves. So not just the direction, but how is it moving? Is it moving by small steps or is it moving by larger steps? I'll give you another example, okay? Right there. The first part of that melody that we used as our example for motivic development. Just that first part. All of those notes are close together, okay? And when you have a melody that is moving by small steps, then we would call that conjunct movement, okay? If it were moving by large steps, right? Large steps would be disjunct movement, you know? So if I were to take that melody and break it apart, okay? It's a pretty extreme example, but you might think perhaps that the Star Spangled Banner moves with disjunct movement. So those notes are close, but not as close as they could be. Right? Okay, or let's say the beginning of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Especially the beginning. We could debate the second part. But the beginning, that's a disjunct movement, right? Because it's moving by a large leap.